Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Monique DiGiorgio. I am the Western Water Program Director for Western Landowners Alliance, and we are so pleased to have you all joining us today. I know people are still logging on. We are recording this webinar, so if you missed the introduction or anything else that you'd like to come back and view, we're going to be sending this recording to everybody that's registered early next week. So thanks so much for joining us. And thanks for being here for the first of our winter webinar series, Low-Tech Process-Based Restoration, the Benefits, Water Rights Issues, and Reducing Risks. Again, my name is Monique DiGiorgio. I'm the Western Water Program Director. It's a new role here at Western Landowners Alliance as we build our water team, and I'm so pleased to be here today to moderate this discussion and information. I am joined also by my colleagues who you can see on screen. Danny Howlett is our membership coordinator, and she was in charge of all of these registrations and getting this webinar up and running. We have Lewis Wirtz, who's our communications director. Jake Lebsack, yep, go ahead and wave, folks, if you want to. Jake Lebsack, you can see, is our water resources coordinator, and he's going to be helping us in the Q&A today and with the chat function. And then we have our presenters, who I will introduce in a moment, but it is now my pleasure to introduce Leslie Allison, who is the CEO of Western Landowners Alliance, to tell you a little bit about who we are and why we're here today.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Western Landowners Alliance. Really excited to be doing this webinar and really excited by the participation we're seeing from all over the place. It just tells us how interesting this topic is to everybody. So I'll give you just a brief introduction to kick us off to the Western Landowners Alliance. We are a West-wide organization of landowners, land managers, and partners dedicated to keeping the working lands of the West whole and healthy for the benefit of both people and wildlife, all the living things that depend on these landscapes. And we support landowners and land managers in their stewardship by helping one another share knowledge, peer-to-peer forums, providing science and information, much like we're doing right here today, opportunities for networking, helping make science more relevant to our management as land managers. We also are working to improve economic opportunities that help keep these lands whole and healthy and help people earn a good livelihood in the process of doing that. And then providing an opportunity for people who have the lived experience of owning and operating, managing land and natural resources to have a strong voice in policy making so that we can get better policies, better public dialogue, and better outcomes on these lands. And we also have a strong communications program led here by Lewis Wirtz to try to communicate the value of private stewardship, of human stewardship on these landscapes across our own community, but importantly to the rest of the public. In an increasingly urbanized society, we need to keep talking across this thing we call the urban-rural divide, and so we can get to a better place in all of these things. So really, that's a nutshell of who we are. We span the 11 Western states. We have millions of acres under management in our membership. And really, it's part of a very large landowner movement of defining the future that we want to see in our world and in the places that we care about, and taking a very positive leadership role in doing that. So with all of that, so delighted to have you all here and joining us today. And I will turn it over to the main program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And again, Monique DiGiorgio, Western Water Program Director. This is the first of our winter webinar series. It's the first Friday of each month at noon. The next one is on soil health and conservation. And I wanted to let folks know that about 488 of you registered and are here with us today. We're really excited about this turnout. It actually is representing 24 states and 2 other nations. So thanks for being here, and that's very exciting for us. So as Leslie said, our goal here at Western Landowners Alliance and this webinar today is to really better understand low-tech process-based restoration from the unique perspective of the land steward. We are the voice of that steward, and we see all the sides of this particular issue. So with 488 people registered, about 300 right now actually joining us today, you might be here because you have a concern about low-tech process-based restoration and water rights, or you might be here because you're interested on employing these types of practices on your land. So as you hear today, Jackie's going to be addressing all of these issues, and then we'll be hearing from Kenyon Fields on his experience on Mountain Island Ranch. And so we're here to listen and engage with the landowner community. And we're also here to support you. One thing we wanted to mention today, as through our water work, we're here to help build the capacity of landowners and organizations that are working with landowners. So you probably are hearing a lot about low-tech process-based restoration. You're hearing a lot about funding at the federal level that's coming in to support these types of things. So if you're interested in this type of work, Western Landowners Alliance has capacity to help. So please feel free to reach out. So here's how it's going to work today. We're going to keep things moving because we have a lot of information to cover. Because this is a informational webinar, and there's so many folks joining us, we're going to ask that you put your name and affiliation in the chat, and then we're going to use a question and answer function for questions towards the end of the presentation and make sure we address your questions. This won't be an active dialogue landowner to landowner. I wanted to mention to you, though, that as part of our Western Water Forum in 2024, we will be hosting these types of dialogues where we get to see all of your awesome faces and we have this type of discussion. So that's very much also the role that we'll be playing. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Jackie and Kenyon. So I want to give you a little bit of a bio for them. So Jackie Corday, she is owner of Corday Natural Resources Consulting. It's a land and water, she is a land and water attorney with over 2 decades of strategically collaborating with numerous local, state, and federal agencies and nonprofits to solve challenges to natural resource issues with a focus on stream and watershed health. She works at the intersection of science, policy, and law with a particular interest in synthesizing the latest science research to help inform policy. And then Kenyon, who's going to be speaking later, we would like to introduce him as well. So Kenyon Fields is a conservation ecologist. He is a founder of Western Landowners Alliance. He's on our board, along with his wife, Mary Conover, and they run Mountain Island Ranch in Utah and Colorado, and you're going to be hearing from Kenyon later. So we're so pleased to have both of you joining us. Jackie's going to speak for about 40-45 minutes, then Kenyon will speak, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. So Jackie, thanks so much, and take it away.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and screen share. And are we good now? You can see my screen?
Yes. Yep, it looks great, Jackie.
Awesome. All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're at. So glad everybody's here to learn about this. And just to give you a little bit more background from myself is why this is a topic that I'm so particularly interested in. I was head of the Colorado Parks and Wildlife's Water Resources section. It's a statewide section that covers all things water quality and water quantity. And back in 2018, this is when low-tech PBR projects first were kind of coming to CPW as an interest of partners, and we really needed to understand the water rights implications, and we needed to understand the science. And so that's kind of where I love to work, at the intersection of what's the law, what's the science on this. And so I started back then 5 years ago, really trying to understand all of those issues around this. So today I'm going to walk you through, because we have quite a few hundred people on here, we're going to start out with a foundation of what is low-tech PBR, what are some of the different methods. Then we'll talk about the benefits, then we'll talk about the water rights implications around that, and then we're going to talk about how to reduce risks if this is the type of work that you are interested in for your property. So first, hold on just a second. Oh, sorry, it's not responding to moving. There we go. Okay, So first, I just wanted to tell you one of my main partners and one of the initiatives that I co-founded and started with Audubon and American Rivers is this group called the Colorado Healthy Headwaters Working Group. And that group was formed particularly around bringing folks together, a lot of different diversity of folks, academic researchers and state agencies, federal agencies, tribes, local government, watershed groups, nonprofits, and restoration practitioners to work together, to collaborate together in different ways to help scale up the health of our watersheds around Colorado. I just wanted to give a shout out to Abby Burke, my main partner for this, and she's on the call today. I don't know. There she is.
Thank you, Jackie. And thanks to everybody for joining today and wanting to learn more around low-tech process-based restoration. This is really amazing. It's been an honor to partner with Jackie and Faye on this outreach across the state of Colorado. So thank you so much for letting me say hello. And thank you, Jackie.
Thanks, Abby. So one of the big initiatives that I worked with American Rivers on is putting together a grant request for the Colorado Water Conservation Board, a grant called Engaging West Slope Agriculture in Headwaters Restoration to Improve Water Security. Because at that point, when we put in for this grant, 2021, I had already done quite a bit of research on the science around restoring headwater streams through process-based restoration methods. And I could see that there was great benefit. The science was showing there was great benefit. And so private landowners are very key and interested in this. That was something that I was seeing. And so I thought it would be really great to understand more about that and have the opportunity to do a deeper dive on the research. So one of the first deliverables under this grant that was approved is putting together a state of the science paper. And that's what you're seeing there on the right-hand side of the screen. This report was completed last November, and it's on the website that is there on the slide. And it's a very comprehensive report, about 70 pages long, that looks at all of the published research and also the emerging case studies that are not quite published yet, just to be able to compile it into one place. And version 2 of this report is going to be available in January of 2024. A lot of the information that you're going to hear about today comes from this research. So in a nutshell, if you were going to encapsulate what the research was about, it's what are the hydrologic, biologic, and ecosystem services effects of restoring a degraded incised stream to a healthy functioning stream. So you could look at it also as, if you have a stream on the right, what are the services, the ecosystem services in that stream versus the one on the left? That's just another way to look at it. So now we're going to dive into part 1. What is low-tech PBR? I'm going to give you some examples, a lot of pictures of showing you what it looks like, and then we'll talk about the benefits to agricultural landowners. So we first have to start at, what is low-tech PBR trying to get at? What is it trying to address? And that's trying to get at the fact that the scale of incised streams, unfortunately, is really great all around the Western states, and actually not just the Western states. It's an issue all around the world as people are becoming interested in this topic of restoring them. We find out more and more studies being published around the world about this. And there's very common causes, a lot of research around what are the common causes. And then there's research around what are the problems? Why is it a problem? And why should we be addressing this by doing some restoration work on it? And so you can see there the list of physical effects: lower groundwater tables, lower summer base flows, higher sedimentation, and loss of riparian and wetlands and forage. So how have we restored or altered or degraded streams in the past? As you're probably aware, the stream restoration has been around for many decades. In particular, it really started picking up in the 90s and into the 2000s. And a typical project can look like this project on the left, where you come in with a heavy equipment and create a meandering stream. But in fact, what that whole valley used to look like is the picture on the right. It used to have a very diffuse flows, quite a few channels going through the entire area. And so if you're doing restoration, like is shown in the picture on the left, you will only have limited ecosystem surfaces as compared to the picture on the right. And plus, it's going to cost you over $1 million a mile to do that kind of restoration. So scientists really started looking into and trying to find out what's another way that we potentially can be doing this work at a lower cost and in restoring all the natural processes of that stream before the degradation occurred. So the big umbrella is called process-based restoration, and it begins with an analysis of what caused the stream degradation. So your approach to addressing that will focus on the causes. So sometimes, I've got this long list here, sometimes it's going to be that a lot of roads were installed, say in a national forest, and a lot of the culverts potentially were undersized, or you have steep road grades with a lot of gravel and sediments coming off. And so maybe that's what you need to look at to restore the stream. It could be removing fish barriers. It could be restoring wood recruitment. If an area had been heavily logged, you might be looking at needing to help get that wood back into the system that helps retain the flows better, grab the sediment, or it may be removing a levee or a dike. All of those different things can range from fairly lower cost to very high cost, but that's the whole range. And today what we're going to focus on is this low-tech process-based restoration, which is a subset of process-based restoration. And low-tech is generally called low-tech because usually it's much lower cost. It's using natural materials that are usually pretty readily available, often right on the site. It's not usually requiring engineering costs. It's not usually requiring heavy equipment. Just maybe post pounders or a really small mini excavator. So it's a lot less labor intensive and cost intensive. And that was one of the reasons why they came up with the low tech versus high tech. So I thought it might be helpful to talk about the different types of methods that are in the toolbox of low tech PBR. And generally those methods that you're going to use is going to be based on where you're working. So your tools that you'll use in perennial and intermittent streams might differ from when you're working in ephemeral streams and wet meadows. And so I've listed them here. A lot of them might be familiar to folks on the call. Beaver mimicry structures, or BDAs, beaver dam analogs, is pretty popular now throughout the West. Post-assisted log structures, large woody debris, rock detention structures, and native sod speed bumps. I have pictures for all of these in the next slides to show you what those look like. And those are usually just the in-stream methods that folks use. There's also methods that get at restoring the whole stream corridor. Those often include grazing management, best management practices around that, replacing undersized culverts that are causing constriction and downcutting and scouring. And then riparian plantings is often in the toolbox of things as well. Now, when you're working in ephemeral systems, like in this picture, you're usually talking about then rock, zetic rock structures, which will be explained. Wicker weirs and grazing management are often the tools there. So now we're going to focus on those perennial and intermittent streams. What do the tools look like? And it's often beaver mimicry structures or BDAs. And the goal there is to reconnect the floodplain by using natural materials to build temporary structures that will slow the flow and catch sediment, such as willows, cobble, and sod. And they're designed to slowly erode that stream and reconnect with its floodplain. these kinds of practices, as we'll talk about throughout this slideshow, are most suitable for first to third order streams, wadable streams, in locations where riverscapes can be restored without constraints from infrastructure or development, so that the river has full access to its floodplain. So it's not for every place, and that's what we'll talk about in this slideshow. I wanted to give you an example, a very recent example. I saw a newspaper article from the Salt Lake Tribune with these pictures in it and explaining about a project that Trout Unlimited had just wrapped up with a private ranch owner. And they worked with that ranch owner to do a combination of things. BDAs in the stream, you can see that they're very low profile, they're very porous, allowing that water to move through, and yet they'll be catching that sediment and slowly reconnecting that stream. And they also, in this case, decided to do some fencing just to give that area a rest for a year or two while the stream is recovering. Here's another example from Western Colorado, a project that used a combination of both PALs and beaver mimicry structures, as you can see in the two pictures. And so far, that project has been very successful. I've gone back to visit it a couple of times. It's pretty exciting to see the recovery that's been happening there. These are examples specifically of PALs, the post-assisted log structures. On the top photos, you're seeing ones that are called bank attached. And then in the bottom one, you're seeing a channel spanning project. And this was often the combination of doing a pinyon pine and juniper removal when they're getting too invasive and coming into the riverscape area. And so then you can do that, do both projects at once. You can do the removal of that pinyon pine, and then you can turn around and use them as your material, your woody material that you're putting back into the stream. And again, in all of these pictures, you can see how the river is just keeping flowing. And we'll continually talk about how that is important for respecting water rights. You can see that all of these projects are working in a way that respects water rights. And here's another one, large woody debris example from Anna Branch Solutions based in Utah. This project that they worked on was in Eastern Oregon. And you can see how they're placing large woody debris into the stream and then just anchoring it in a few places with posts. Now, what about systems where you're working in intermittent streams, where beaver cannot survive? Or maybe you're working in a system where you don't want beaver to come back. In these particular systems, the PALs are still a great tool to use that. And I think Kenyon in particular is going to be talking about that on this picture on the right. And here's a picture on the left showing you rock detention structures that were installed by a landowner on a big ranch in southeastern Arizona. The picture and research was done by USGS research physical scientist Dr. Lauren Norman. She has been a prolific writer, and there are a lot of great studies that she's done about these rock detention structures and the benefits that they provide. Very similar to the BDA structures that we were just showing you. So you could Google her name and come up with a lot of the papers on that. All right, but what if you're working in an ephemeral drainage, wet meadows? And this picture just cues up the issue that often has happened in wet meadows is you have erosion gullies cutting up, moving up the valley, and they're taking out that really precious resource for livestock and wildlife, these wet meadow areas that are so rare that it's only 2% of the land base in these drier sagebrush systems. And so you don't want that to disappear. Well, there's really great methods that have been developed over the last decade to address that. And those are called Zedick rock work. And that's named after Bill Zedick, who was a Forest Service hydrologist. And while he was at the Forest Service, he worked over and over on finding ways to be able to stop these head cuts, because there's just so much damage from those head cuts as they continue to travel up and take away that precious resource. So over the years, he worked on developing with many partners these types of methods to stop those head cuts and preserve those meadows. And so that's also another low-tech PBR tool in the toolbox in ephemeral streams. And this is the kind of area that you see all around the Western states in particular. Every state pretty much has areas that look like this, so it's a really great tool to be able to use. This is just another picture. And here's a really great resource. It's a technical note that was published by NRCS on what are all the tools in this toolbox called zetic rock structures. There's many different types of designs getting at different types of issues. And so now you've seen all the different tools in the toolbox. Well, what are the benefits of restoring streams via low-tech PBR? One of the big reasons why it's really catching on so fast around the West is the science. There's numerous case studies now showing how effective it is for restoring ecological and ecosystem services. And again, I show my paper because that's now a really comprehensive resource to look to, where all of those papers are put into one place. So in one slide, this is the benefits, all kind of all listed, and the research that's been done on the benefits is in the paper, but I'm just going to quickly kind of highlight what some of those benefits are, and then we're going to focus in particular on the last bullet there that's circled in red: improved availability of water and forage for livestock and wildlife, and how these case studies are showing that. So, and again, in one slide, this is one of my favorite slides that was prepared by Dr. Susan Charney of the USDA Pacific Research Station. For many years, she wanted to understand what were the impacts when you did this kind of work, what were the benefits, what were landowners' feelings around this, what were they seeing, what were things that were really important to them. And she did that work for several years and did dozens and dozens of interviews with landowners who had had this kind of work done, either on their land or on leased land, on BLM or Forest Service lands that they leased. And these were the big things, the takeaways for them: improved water availability and forage quality and quantity increased. So the improved water availability came from higher groundwater table, improved stream flows, and increased water availability. And then the pasture, it was also improved from having that hydrologic lift underneath and hydrating the meadow grasses underneath. So what is really driving those benefits? I wanted to make sure you understood the hydrologic effects of a stream when you go from in-size to gradually reconnecting it with its floodplain. And so these graphics from Mark Beardsley at Ecometrics are super helpful in understanding that concept. You see, starting at the bottom with the incised stream that's completely disconnected from all of what used to be the riparian vegetation. And you look at it and the water table is way down there. And then as that stream slowly starts being restored and reconnected, you see that water table comes up and plants start coming back. And then when it's fully reconnected, you see all of that vegetation that's now able to access that water table. So this is what the water table looks like in streams that have been restored and reconnected to their floodplain. But then I just also recently found this graphic that I thought was super helpful to understand, well, what's the difference between a stream without a beaver that is connected to its floodplain and one that has a beaver complexes on it. And I thought this graphic was really great in explaining that. And this research from a PhD candidate who's now graduated from University of Washington, and the study that he did to show that beaver pond sites stored 2.4 times more water underground than surface water. And that is why a lot of studies have been showing that the water lasts longer into the season, why your stream will last longer into the season. Sometimes streams without beaver complexes would go dry in July, in August. And then when the beaver returned, there's case studies showing that it went back to being perennial because of this effect of having that water slowly released throughout the season. So this is part of the research also that's featured in the white paper that I did, thinking about drought resilience in particular, and how when you have this single stream that's disconnected from its floodplain versus this riparian area with multiple beaver areas, how that could be even thought about as a second snowpack. We all know how critically important the first snowpack is in all of the Western states for water supplies. But what the science is starting to show, we need to be thinking about restoring our headwater systems, and that they could service as our second snowpack as well. So here's a really successful case example on private land showing those benefits. The Sylvie's Ranch in Eastern Oregon, a very dry area. This was a low-tech project on 18 miles of stream, treated with structures, and then the beaver were able to come back in. And these before and after photos show you exactly why a rancher is getting this better benefit of greater forage and water availability. And I really loved the quote. It started out as a grazing story, then a beaver story, now it's a water story, but it's really probably a soil story, because what beavers are doing is creating these floodplains with this rich organic soil with a lot of carbon, which really holds water. And so this is another similar story here in Colorado. On this map, what you can see is the mix of private and public lands. And the BLM, Bureau of Land Management lands, are in that light orange color. And the private lands are in purple, and the state lands are in blue. And a project to restore this in areas that looked like this, try to turn them back to a healthy vegetated corridor, started on BLM land. But all of the private landowners around were informed about the project, asked to be partners, wanted them to be part of this. So they said, well, we don't know about this. We've never heard about this. Why don't you start out on BLM land and see how it goes? Well, it went so great that soon after the success on the BLM lands, the private landowners said, hey, come on over to my ranch and do this work too, because I see these benefits are very important, especially as it gets drier and drier in the Western states. And the main things that they did were these sod speed bumps, just placing these native sod speed bumps down into the entrenched, incised stream, doing some grazing practices, BMPs, and doing plantings. And it's been an extremely successful project. And I just wanted to show you one more picture that I think is really incredible. It's from Carol Evans, who is a biologist for the BLM for a long time. And she took pictures of particular areas in Nevada of where they were working with ranchers to implement best management practices on grazing, which was mostly about timing on when you had the cattle in these areas and being able to move them. And the changes that she saw once those practices were implemented over the decades were just absolutely incredible, as you can see in the picture. And one last slide on this, because I love this slide so much, from NRCS. Restored riverscapes like this are the very essence of drought resiliency. When you look at that picture on the left, and what was able to be accomplished just in a few years with these low-tech methods, that is just really, truly amazing, and gives a lot of hope for, like, hey, we're learning so much in these last decade. These simple methods, these low-cost methods, can really turn things around for agricultural landowners and wildlife. Wildfire resilience, just a few slides on the dramatic differences that scientists are documenting, especially Dr. Emily Fairfax, on her study of what happens after mega fires in these dry Western states, and how where you have a beaver complex, it survived, and where you didn't have a beaver complex, it didn't survive. And that has a lot to do with how wet the vegetation is, and the fire hits that and basically stops. And she documented that around a lot of the western states. Here's one in Oregon, the huge bootleg fire. You can see what the beaver complex survived. And in Colorado, the Cameron Peak fire, same thing, beaver complexes survived. And then they were able to trap all of that incredible debris flow that always happens after fires in the stream, instead of it going all the way down and ending up in headgates and other ditch infrastructure and water intakes for municipalities. So a lot of information about beavers. I'm seeing a lot of headlines like this all over in different types of media. But what we need to acknowledge is that beaver are not going to work everywhere in every situation, right? And not everyone is going to be open to beaver knowing the work involved to manage them. And so I really appreciated this dialogue that I was having with Nathan Seward from CPW, who's a wildlife conservation biologist. And I thought this quote I grabbed from an email that he sent me is that while beaver are the gold standard for wetland and riparian restoration, we need to understand the beaver may create a headache and increase workload to the producer. So start with smaller, low-risk techniques, which can accomplish great results, but will take more time. Describe the trade-offs. It's important to consider this gradient in restoration. We're going to talk about this in the very last section of this program today. And just a couple more pictures I showed about what does that look like when you're not working with beaver. So now we're going to go into the water rights, another very important area of research that I've looked into for years and had many conversations over. So because we have so many folks on the call from all over the United States today, I just wanted to start with this. The water law doctrine in the US, it is different across the United States. The gray in the eastern half is the riparian doctrine. And that's where there's not been issues around water rights with beaver. There's different issues with beaver, certainly issues, but it's not generally around water rights. But then when you come into the drier states, where every single drop is measured and is so precious, that's where there's the prior appropriation doctrine. And that's where there's been much more conversation and concerns around what are the impacts of low-tech PBR. And so our talk today, of course, is going to focus on Western states. So what is the issue with low-tech PBR? So it looks different. And that is like one of the first things that you want to acknowledge when you're in these conversations. It's one of the first things I wanted to acknowledge whenever I was having conversations with folks. It looks different. It is different. That's led to some concerns, and we need to acknowledge that. But when that's why I wanted to do the deep dive on the science. Let's make sure we understand what the science is showing. And when I did, I found that thus far the science is showing there shouldn't be an assumption of harm if it's done properly. And there are ways that you can go wrong and impact water rights, and that we'll talk about that on the risk section of this program. But if you are do it properly, the science is showing that there's benefits. It's a win-win all the way across. So we won't have time to go into all of this slide because I see Monique came on and I've got 5 minutes. So the main point of this slide is that there's a lot of different variation as you go across the state on how they deal with low-tech PBR and BDAs in particular. So I urge you to look into that and see what the policy is in your state. I'm going to talk about just a few seconds on SB 270. This is a new law that was passed in Colorado this past session to specifically get at how can you do stream restoration with very minimal, if any, impacts on water rights and not have to go and get a water right. And so this bill passed specifically to get at, we know that there's these incredible benefits to being able to have healthy functioning floodplains and streams. So how can we facilitate that work moving forward? And the legislature passed this SB 270 And it includes 6 minor stream restoration activities that can proceed without getting a water right, but there's a lot of criteria. There's a lot of information here on how you have to carefully meet each of these criteria for your project in order to fit under this exemption to having to get a water right. And Abby Burke and I have been on a roadshow for the past 3 months, going around the state of Colorado doing in-person trainings. They're 3 hours long to unpack all of this information for folks. And we're going to put into the chat, Abby and Monique is going to put into the chat your opportunity to come to future sessions on that training if this topic is of real interest to you, because I am going to speed ahead because I don't have time to go through the training on it. Because I want to make sure that we get to this last part, how to reduce risks of projects downstreams. So first off, we're going to go back to that principle that CPW biologist Nathan Seward brought up. Like, start with low risk project types. So rangeland, wet meadow, gully erosion is probably on the lowest order. I have never heard of a water right complaint yet. And again, I've had probably hundreds of conversations over the past 5 years on this. And I've never heard of a water complaint yet on these ephemeral streams because there's no water right filed on it. And it's just very minimal impact as far as just holding onto that water a little bit longer so it doesn't become a gully and erode down. So that's a very low risk approach that you can take. If you have a little bit more risk tolerance, you can consider the first and second order streams, the small streams far away from any diversions is your next step up. You could be thinking about rock detention structures if you are in Southeast Arizona. You could then be thinking about, all right, what if I am working on a perennial stream? I do understand that beaver may come back, and that's potentially a good thing. I'm okay with that. You can plan ahead for that. And you can take preemptive actions to reduce the risk of them building on your road culvert and flooding your field or your road. And this picture shows you a little what we call a starter dam. So it's built away from the culvert so that beaver will come back and build on that, and it won't impact your culvert. And so far, this one that was built in 2021 has been successful in doing that. You can also employ coexistence measures. And I have been telling folks in all of the presentations I'm doing that assistance for landowners with the funding and the expertise in choosing the right coexistence measure is really important to be thinking about that when you're putting together your budget for your project. Be proactive in planning. And this is the big slide that does take some time to unpack, but I wanted to tell you that we're going to share this particular slide out with you. I'm going to be sending this to WLA staff, and they're going to share it with you. So in case we didn't have time to go all through this, but I do want to highlight these things. There are many different BMPs, best management practices, that you can be thinking about to reduce any impacts to water rights by choosing these things with care. Location and who you're working with. The design, when you're thinking about very porous designs that the water keeps flowing through. Timing of installation, making sure that you don't cut off or reduce or impact water because you don't want to be doing it at a time where your structures might impact it. So often thinking about working on before the irrigation season gets going or after it. Engagement, transparency, many partners, very important. Thinking about who might have concerns and including them and addressing their concerns. And then post-project considerations, some of those we just hit in the previous slides. Assisting landowners with beaver coexistence, thinking about monitoring changes and adaptive management. Those are all important things. I'm going to go to one last slide because it's such a great visual. Here's a design consideration to avoid impacts to water rights. A very aggressive BDA shown on the left versus a very porous I hold this up on the one on the right as the model that you want to be thinking about so that you're not impacting your downstream water rights. So I'm going to stop screen share at that and turn it back to Monique.
Thank you so much, Jackie. That was super informative. And I see that Jake's put quite a few resources in the chat, including the Western Landowners Alliance website, Jackie's paper, the technical webinars that Jackie and Abby will be presenting. And we'll also follow up to the webinar with this recording and all of those resources. And then just as a friendly reminder, keep the questions coming in the Q&A. Jake is basically summarizing those, and we'll take the last 10 to 15 minutes or so to answer your questions. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Kenyon Fields with Mountain Island Ranch, and he is going to talk about his experience implementing low-tech process-based restoration on Mountain Island Ranch. Thanks so much, Kenyon.
Thank you. It's an honor to be invited to do this, and that was a great presentation, Jackie. You'll see a lot of those techniques in use on our ranch, which Mountain Island is, we call it the blank spot on the map between Moab, Utah, and Grand Junction, Colorado. We have Colorado River waterfront, but what I'm going to talk about today is a tributary, the Little Dolores River. About 15 miles of it runs through the ranch. And basically there still are beaver in the upper reaches of it, but after 23 years of drought, they no longer can subsist in the lower stretches because it's now become an ephemeral stream in the past few years for the first time in anyone's memory. This year it didn't. It ran all year, and we irrigated from it all year. But in just a few in recent years, it'll be dry by Memorial Day. So in addition to dealing with the drought, we're also finding this is inherently a flashy sort of system and a flashy part of the world, but climate chaos has really changed the hydrology such that, for example, you might get a warm weekend in February and all the snow from 6,000 to 8,000 feet will melt practically overnight and rush off and incise the stream very deeply, and so basically we thought, and meanwhile we have Russian olives taking over the cottonwood galleries. So before we go to the next slide on the right, you can see some destroyed post-assisted log structures that just couldn't put up with this particular flood. But let's go to the next slide. So classic incising of a stream and separating it from its floodplain. Next slide. So we started first by removing Russian olives, sometimes with heavy equipment, ideally with the cut stump method, where you just chainsaw it and apply herbicide to the living cambium ring. Next slide. But in some places, the Russian olives were so out of control, we really had to bring in some big guns. And I've circled just a few examples, but if you look closely, all those brown circles are huge burn piles of removed Russian olive. It wasn't that bad throughout the whole system, but in some places it completely removed, taken over the native cottonwoods, and of course are sucking up a tremendous amount of water. Next slide. So here's an old meander of the Little Dolores before we removed, and next slide. There's an after shot. Oh. We then had to go in and plant native shrubs and try to restart the system. Keep going. So one of the things we've done is partner with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on, we have Gunnison sage grouse on the ranch, and there are these old treatments from the 90s where pinyon and juniper were removed and have needed to be retreated. So we doubled up with our PALS building project. And next slide, had Western Colorado Conservation Corps young folks come and camp on the ranch for weeks at a time and haul pinyon and juniper for use for building these PALs. They tend to be really good, and Russian olives, of course, have painful long thorns that you make you really not want to work with them. So go ahead. So through some of our area, we can get a post driver to the stream, or a piece of machinery, but in a lot of the Little Dolores, we had no access for driving posts. In general, I'd say when you can get a post driver to the stream, those PAL structures will last a lot longer than unpinned structures. Next slide. And so we did a combination of manually chipping away at the hard edge of the incised banks, partly to use the mud to compact the pinyon juniper, and then next slide, drive the posts through them. So you can see piles of removed Russian olive in the background, and freshly completed PAL. And then we would in some cases use the removed Russian olive for water gaps. So in a flashy system like this, it's always hard to build a water gap for cattle that will not just get blown out with every flood. So we'd pile them right in the stream, up on the up and downstream side of a water gap. And those have worked out really well. Next slide. Here you can see a PAL that survived a flash. You can see the laid down grass on either side, and the chocolate milk water from a recent flood. But some of them, there's no sign of them. Everything is just completely torn out after a flood. Next. And here's in a more still water circumstance. Obviously the effects of the PAL are very obvious. We've raised the water several feet, slowed it down. It's infiltrating the banks. There are just so many benefits that come from this simple work. Next slide. In general, if you have money to build, let's say 10 PALs, and you ask, should I build one per mile over 10 miles, or should I build 10 in 1 mile? I'd say build 10 in the first 100 yards and go get some more money. The benefits of having a lot of them stacked up close to each other are significant. And ideally, you want the back end of a pond to touch the next dam all the way up, and it keeps the system much more wetted and slows the velocity as well, so that if you maybe lose the first PAL or two upstream, all the material just gets caught by the third PAL downstream. Next slide. Like I said, in a lot of places, we couldn't get a post driver to the stream, so we just use whatever materials we could gather locally and dump them into the stream. Next. And let nature do the work. This is process-based restoration. So next flood comes along, and it takes our piles and puts them where it thinks they should be. And in many cases, it forms a very functional dam. So we're starting to maybe move away from actually bothering to pile the material, and instead just walk along either bank and throw whatever we can find into the stream and let nature organize it for us. Next slide. So here's exactly what we want to see happen. Again, you can see Russian olive piles on the left, and then in the cottonwood gallery, it's all fresh mud from a recent flood. Next slide. So you'll see circled in blue, there's a PAL, and the red arrow showing how the water hit the PAL, and as it often does, will blow out one side of it. And in this case, diverted all that water into the cottonwood gallery, which of course cottonwoods need that fresh soil for germination. Next slide. You can see the Little Dolores behind the cottonwood there in the back, and piles of olive, and then just standing floodwater. So this is at a high flow level already, but the fact that we've got a lot of dams in this stretch really wetted the floodplain. Next. And in some cases, the very within a year, we have all this cottonwood recruitment where we wouldn't otherwise have had it. Next. Here you see cottonwoods growing where olives used to be. Next. Willows. In some areas we didn't get this sort of success or haven't yet, but in some areas it's almost right away. You give them room to grow and wet their floodplain, and this is what happens. Next. So this is a 7-mile stretch on the Colorado side, and those are the 200 plus structures we've built in the Little Dolores. And we've been able to work across property lines because right away we went to the BLM and said, look, if we can find the money and the crews to do it, would you let us do this work on the BLM lands and ignore political boundaries? And it took a little while, but the answer became yes. And next slide. They became very enthusiastic partners, both with the olives and the pals, and started sending idle fire crews in the winter to come burn some of the piles, and have just been great partners. Next slide. So just quickly before I wrap up, shifting to some wet meadow work. This is what should be a fen, a slowly moving wet meadow that with no discernible main channel. But again, due to a variety of reasons, it became very channelized. Next slide. And so you can just keep moving through these slides. So we combined the techniques of Z-dike structures, the rock work with PALs. This is working with the state and the Colorado West Land Trust. And here's weaving some of them with willow branches. Go ahead. In some cases, much more designed structures, heavily built structures, and can, in some cases more expensive, but keep going. But we found within a year we had to go back and build them higher because we had already graded so much and slowed the sediment so much that we had to, add on to the structures and keep going. By now, as you walk through this area, for much of the year, you're going to get your boots wet no matter where you walk because that grass is just soaked. Next slide. And then there's the mistletoe effect that we never knew about that these pals can have. The last thing we've recently done was build some drift fences. I don't have a photograph of, to keep elk and cattle from just walking down the stream channel and disperse their use of the wet meadow. So I just wanted to thank Colorado West Land Trust, who's been a great partner in all of this work and helped with. We got a number of different funding sources for this, but the Restore Colorado program is an annual program now that paid for a lot of this. And I'd also say make use of volunteers. Volunteers love to do this work. It's really rewarding for them to come out, and we get a lot done without having to pay for it. So I'll quit there.
Thank you so much, Kenyon. I like the mistletoe effect. That was probably unexpected. And what an amazing amount of work. We feel really honored that you shared that with us today. And perfect timing. We have 10 to 15 minutes for questions and answers, and we have some good ones in the chat. So I'm going to moderate. We've got questions both for Kenyon and Jackie. I'll be equitable and go back and forth. Let's start with Jackie. So Jackie, the first question we had was, when appropriate, can you please discuss whether Clean Water Act permitting is required? And that was from Kent.
Okay. Yeah, that was a topic that I wasn't able to go into based on time. But so if you're working in a perennial stream, an intermittent stream, pretty darn sure you're going to need a 404 permit. But most of the time across the Western states, they're using the nationwide 27 permit for this type of work, which is a streamlined permitting process as compared to an individual permit, that's for sure. So yeah, perennial and intermittent, pretty much you're going to need the 404. If for the ephemeral work, when I've spoken to landowners and public landowners as well as private, that's like outside of the jurisdiction because it's not a WOTUS, it's not a wetland or water of the United States, ephemeral streams. And so for the most part, you do not need a permit. And that's in Colorado, the conversations I've had. I have not had those conversations outside of Colorado with other state landowners.
Awesome. Thanks, Jackie. The next question is for Kenyon. Kenyon, have you monitored your project's success, and what metrics are you most interested in tracking, and for how long?
We put in some water temperature sensors and other monitoring devices that have all been blasted out by floods. We just actually, we were working with Anna Branch as the lead for building these PALs, and Scott was recently at the ranch walking the whole stretch, re-GPSing where structures are to see if we can learn any patterns as to which kinds of structures and which locations lasted. And then we're doing, we're not doing formal monitoring protocols, but we're informal, like before and after photographs and videos of the stream banks to see what kind of vegetation response we get. And then of course we're gonna get to watch in time if beavers are able to move back down into the lower reaches, but I think we still have more structures to build before that'll happen.
Awesome. Thanks, Kenyon. And then Jackie, back to you. Can you please explain the difference between a BDA and a POW?
Sure. So the difference generally, and the manual that I put up there, the low-tech PBR manual from Professor Wheaton at USU, is the Bible, the reference Bible to go back and get a more in-depth explanation of the difference of when you would want to use one, what's the differences. But generally, BDAs are going to be channel spanning, and they're often going to have more material put behind them to act a little bit more like a beaver dam would. And so they're going to be a little, they're going to be less porous overall than a PAL, which is often attached to the bank. There's also channel spanning PALs, but they're generally more porous. And so as I was talking to folks over these past few years around the water rights issue, generally folks would say, man, if there's any concern about water rights, we generally go to PALs and use PALs because they are so completely porous. Whereas beaver dam analogs, depending on how they're built, can range from not quite so porous to very porous, just really depending on how they're constructed.
Great, thank you, Jackie. Kenyon, next question for you. What outside resources did you leverage for these projects, and was it difficult to find the relevant information you needed for implementation?
We started small. We went to River's Edge West, formerly the Tamarisk Coalition, and I think started out with a $30,000 grant to do some Russian olive removal pilot programs, where we tried all the different methods, hoping we'd make some mistakes and learn from them and meet people along the way. And it just took off. The more you start doing this and telling people, the more people want to be involved, the more resources are available. Suddenly you've got multiple nonprofits, volunteers, core crews, feds, state, and somebody in Fish and Wildlife says, hey, I've got an extra 30 grand this year to do exactly what you're doing. Would you like it? And it's become it's like there's a family that's developed around these projects.
Awesome.
Just get started.
Just get started. Good advice. Jackie, next question for you. What would you recommend for restoration methods, this is pretty specific, on streams in karst topography, limestone areas, Pennsylvania, which I know you're a Westerner, so if you need to kick it, you can, but use of primarily woody debris in past restoration projects in these types of regions? This person said they haven't held up well during high flow events following storms or spring runoff. And that was a question from Ben.
Yeah, that's These have all been really great questions. I really appreciate this interaction with the attendees. That's a really tough one, because as you were reading the question, I'm thinking in my mind, oh, large woody debris, large woody, like being able to stack like what Kenyon did, in that picture, and letting the river decide where it's going to end up. And it really depends on the size and the velocity of the water that's coming down, because you're not going to be able to pound posts in it. It sounds like that's what I'm kind of hearing in the question, is that you've got this hard rock bottom because it's been scoured from long time ago. You're down to bedrock. You're not going to be able to put posts in it. So yeah, I think you're kind of really stuck more with that, trying to stack wood in it and letting the river sort it out. I know that's not as satisfactory as you probably would like, Ben. I'm sorry about that. I haven't really worked in the eastern areas with that kind of a complication. I do have a reference for somebody who I've that works back in the East and that does really incredible work, and he would probably know a lot more. So I will find that link to his website and just pop it in the chat.
Great, thanks, Jackie. And since we are running out of time, I don't know if we'll get to every single question, but we're doing our best. So back to Kenyon here. Kenyon, can you talk about how you navigated liability concerns with volunteers on site, if you had any? Labor, and this is from Ariel. Ariel says labor limitations are their biggest barrier to doing more work, and the landowners that they lease from don't want volunteer crews out.
Right. Do it through a nonprofit. Find a local nonprofit that has that settled and have them help organize. For starters, they're probably going to have a great mailing list that like Colorado West would say whatever, or even just wildlife friendly fencing. They put out in their mailing list, suddenly we have an overflow sign up for Saturday to come to the ranch and do it under their umbrella on our ranch. Of course, we also have liability waivers that we have people sign. And youth conservation corps would be the next cheapest step, I think, beyond volunteer labor, where again, you're covered through somebody else's organization.
Great, thanks, Kenyon. Jackie, can you speak more about evapotranspiration and any research that looks at the impact or lack thereof on water rights holders?
Yeah, that was definitely something I really wanted to dig into in the research and trying to find papers on that. So, unfortunately, there's not a lot yet. There's a lot in the works as people are doing more research, but I will tell you about one in particular that was helpful on that issue, because of course that's one of the concerns around water rights, is more evapotranspiration, or ET. And so one of the papers that I looked at was from Andy Bobst, who is a senior hydrologist for Montana Bureau of Mines, and he was working on his PhD at MSU in Bozeman. And one of the projects that he wanted to do was he wanted to find this out, like what happens when you do a stream restoration project with low-tech PBR, you use BDA type structures, and you have riparian vegetation come back. So of course you're going to have more ET when you have more plants. The question is, does that translate to enough ET to actually impact the flows? And so that's what he wanted to understand. And he used very sophisticated, expensive equipment and modeling to finally come to the conclusion that, one, it was so hard to measure that he could not measure it at the stream gauge where water rights are measured. He could only model it, and what he came to the conclusion of was 0.7 gallons per BDA structure. And so it was like, that was how much was being impacted, is something like if you could think of a gallon in an entire stream, a good size, I don't know if it was a second order or third order, but it's a decent sized stream, and you would have only a gallon difference, less than a gallon difference. That's what he was able to measure. And so that is featured in the paper, that research as well. And other papers are basically showing that they can't measure it at the stream gauge, because there's not a question of whether or not there is a little less. There is, you're going to have more ET, but is it enough to actually show up in flows? And that's what so far the research is saying, no.
Thank you, Jackie. Kenyon, I'm going to do 2 in 1 here because there's still 3 more questions for you. But one question is whether or not there were beavers in the lower area that you showed, and whether there were more cottonwoods in that lower area. And then the other was around describing the drift fence approach for mitigating elk in wet meadows. In Arizona, Sarissa is saying that full exclosures along wet meadow sections to limit elk pressure are key, but a drift fence approach sounds like it could be less maintenance. Can you speak to that?
Sure. In reverse order, we really wanted to do a complete exclosure around a number of our wet meadow areas, and the costs were astronomical because of just the sheer size. And we have a lot of elk up there, so they have to be pretty serious fences. So we went with the drift fence approach. Honestly, I was the holdout in the group saying I cannot imagine these are going to do anything. I think they're going to be just money spent, and we're about to find out. We decided to trust the natural resource experts who wanted to do it and say go for it. And we're all about a lot of this is about experimenting, and I don't think there's such thing as mistakes if you're learning from them, right? And so we decided to go for it. Ask back in a year or two, I guess. As far as the beavers, the beavers historically went all the way down the Little Dolores, and it's only until recently that basically now because we have to use our water right at the headquarters hay farm, by the time we've diverted that water and used it on our hay farm, there's nothing left to put back in the stream. And so in some of these years, it's drying out for the whole summer, which we hate to see happen, but that's the situation we're in. And so it's about at that diversion where beavers can't persist farther downstream, just upstream. And it's where, our hope is in time we'll have enough features and have removed enough non-native straws drinking from the stream that the beavers will be able to become our maintenance crew. And we won't have to do this work anymore, and they'll be able to persist in their historic full range.
Great. Thank you, Kenyon. So there were a couple more questions. We're out of time, so we're going to wrap up. I think what we can do, there was a really good question about monitoring that to Jackie. So what we'll do is provide all of these links and resources. We'll get some answers to the questions we weren't able to answer, and we'll provide that all in an email to everyone and make sure that, if you had a burning question, we can answer. One was also around your inspiration, Kenyon. So maybe you could write something about what inspired you, and we can share that with the group. But I just want to take the last minute to thank our panelists, Jackie and Kenyon. I want to thank all of the WLA staff, and I want to let you know that by registering for this webinar, you automatically became, oh, I love the applause. You automatically became a member for free. At the same time, we do rely on support from members like you, so please consider a donation. And I also want to say, of all the registrants, 3/4 of you are practicing landowners, and so we really appreciate you taking your time out of the day to join us. And then finally, I want to thank our sponsors. So we want to thank the Gates Family Foundation for their support of the webinar series, and also thank those who support our water work broadly, including Conscience Bay Research, the Fund to Protect New Mexico Air, Water, and Federal Public Lands, Santa Fe Community Foundation, LORE, and Walton Family Foundation. And we got you out of here at 1:16. Please check back. We're going to do 3 more of these, and they're going to be really great. They'll be posted on our website. So thank you so much to everybody, and have a great day.